Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make mushroom turnovers, and this is what they look like. This pastry is wonderfully tender and flaky, and then inside we're going to put this delicious mushroom and onion filling. So we're going to start by making our pastry. This is actually a cream cheese pastry. That's what gives it that really nice and tender and flaky texture. So if you have a stand mixer, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. The first thing we need is a half a cup, which is 113 grams of butter. Have your butter at room temperature. While I'm using unsalted, I prefer the flavor. You could use salted here. So what I'm going to do is just beat this on medium-low speed just until it's nice and smooth. Okay, that looks good. And as always, scrape the sides and the bottom of your bowl as much as you need to get everything mixed together. And now I'm going to add 8 ounces, which is 225 grams of cream cheese. This is your regular full-fat cream cheese, and have that at room temperature. That in there. And then I'm going to mix these again, medium-low speed, just until everything, you don't want any lumps, so you want to beat it until it's nice and creamy and smooth. Okay, that looks good. You want to make sure that just everything's mixed together, no lumps. Good scrape. And then we only have one more ingredient. You will need 1.5 cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. Okay, and just put that in. And then we just want to mix this again, medium-low speed, until everything's mixed together. Okay, that's it. I like easy stuff. So that is our pastry. Now we do have to chill it. Makes it much easier to roll out. The cream cheese makes this quite an elastic dough. So if you've ever made like just all butter pastry, you will notice a difference in the feel of this dough with the lots of cream cheese. Okay. Okay. So just gather it into a ball, and then I'm just going to eyeball this because we want to just divide it in half. Easier to roll out like just half than this really big ball of dough. So then just take some plastic wrap, put it into the center, kind of make it into a round, flatten it out, and then we're going to cover this up and then put it into the refrigerator. Now it takes about an hour to chill this. You want it firm. But you could leave this in the refrigerator like overnight, or actually for about 2 days. And it can be frozen if you kind of want to make your dough ahead of time and then make your filling and finish off your turnovers later. That's fine too. So put that into the refrigerator. And when we come back, we will start our mushroom filling. So for our mushroom filling, you will need a large saucepan. And I'm going to add 1 tablespoon, about 14 grams of butter to that, as well as 1 tablespoon, I'm using an olive oil. Now, if you prefer, you could use just 2 tablespoons of butter or 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I like the mix. So I'm just going to melt the butter and heat up the oil. And while that's happening, of course, we need mushrooms. So you will need a half a pound, which is 225 grams. Now, when this recipe, I'm going to date myself a little here, I got this out of a magazine probably around 1980. And at that time, couldn't find a lot of mushrooms except for the white button mushrooms. So that's typically what I use. But today I decided, but you could mix or use something else. Today I'm going to use half of the white button, and then I'm using half the portobello mushrooms. Kind of a nice change, you know, a couple different flavors. Now, I don't put my mushrooms under water. What I do is take a damp paper towel, and then I just kind of clean off all the stuff, the brown stuff, like so. And then you want to finely chop your mushrooms. This is what takes some time, because, you know, our mushroom turnovers are quite small, so that filling has to be pretty fine. So just like so. And that's done. And then you will need 1 small onion, and you need to finely chop that. So that will give about 3/4 of a cup, or about 120 grams of your finely chopped onion. So we're almost there with that. So what I'm going to do is first just add my onions. I'm going to get those going because they take a little longer to cook than your mushrooms do. You smell that butter? So I'm going to saute this for about a minute, and then I'm going to add my mushrooms. Put that up a little. Have it medium-high. Okay, so the onion softened a little, so now I'm going to add all of my mushrooms. And then we're just going to continue to saute our mixture till the onion gets nice and soft, and then the mushrooms cook down, become nice and tender. They will release a lot of water, and we want to get rid of that moisture, so it's going to take a little bit, as you can see. It starts out with a lot of mushrooms, but it really goes down. And then salt and pepper. You know, I hesitate to say, because some people, you know, really taste salt, and some people not so much. So I'm going to say 1/4, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon. You know, when you're cooking, you need to taste. So we are going to taste this at the end, and then we can adjust our seasoning. And then pepper, 1/4 to a 1/2. I like peppers, so I tend to go a little heavy on that. But again, we can adjust at the end. So I'm just going to continue to saute this. So as you can see, those mushrooms have really released the liquid, and so there is a lot of water in the pan. So I'm going to continue to cook that because I want that liquid to evaporate. So just keep sauteing. So that looks really good. You can see most of the liquid has evaporated. So now what I'm going to do is add 2 tablespoons of white wine. I do that, 1, of course, for flavor, and 2, it deglazes the pan, gets rid of all, if there's any little any mushrooms or onions sticking to your pan. You do not have to do this. Actually, the original recipe didn't call for that, but you know, I like a little bit of the white wine, and it does like burn off, so you're just left with that wonderful flavor. And have your heat, you know, medium-high. And then I'm also going to add at this point 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme. That's a nice flavor with the mushrooms and the onions. So I can smell it. So now we want to just sprinkle over the top 1 tablespoon, about 10 grams of flour. So we want to thicken this mixture up just a little, and I'm just going to cook the flour for maybe like a minute. Keep stirring. Turn my heat down a little. I'm going to medium-low at this point. And then we have one more ingredient. I'm going to add 1/4 cup, 60 grams of sour cream. You know, it thickens it, plus it adds a little bit of tanginess, which I think is excellent. You could use plain yogurt. Or if you want to like modernize it, which I've done, is you could use 1/4 cup, 60 grams of like a mild goat cheese and just crumble it. If you're going to do that, what I do is I take the mixture off the heat once I add and cook the flour, let it cool down a little to room temperature, and then add the goat cheese, because I like to have like the little pieces. I don't want the goat cheese to melt into my mushroom filling. So that's, stir that, and I am going to taste it. You know, when you cook, you have to keep tasting your seasoning. If you don't have enough salt, your filling will taste a little bit flat. So it's important. I am going to add a little bit more, just a little, and a little pepper. I like pepper. So that is our mushroom filling. Now again, you could make this the day before that you're going to assemble your mushroom turnovers if you don't want to do everything the same day. So I'm going to just put this in here. We want to cool this down at least to room temperature before we assemble our turnovers. You don't want this melting your pastry. So that's that. So I'm going to clean up here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to roll out our pastry. So we're ready to roll our pastry. It's chilled, so flour your surface, and you will need a rolling pin. Put your dough. I'm just going to flip that over and flour my rolling pin. So now when you roll, keep lifting and turning your dough. That way you get a more even thickness rolling, plus you're checking to see whether it's sticking. And you can see I'm kind of moving it around with the flour. And when you roll, don't roll right off the dough, because then what happens is the ends end up thinner than the center. And what we're going to do is roll this pretty thin, like 1/8 of an inch. Let's see. As you can see, it's a very elastic dough. I think of all the doughs, it's a lot easier to roll than, say, a butter pastry. Good one to start if you're a novice. Okay, that looks good. Run your hand over it. You can kind of tell the thickness. And then, you know, pick your dough up, you stretch it, and then let it come back on its own. Well, that's good. You can see it's pretty thin. So now we need to cut out rounds. I'm using a 3-inch, that's about 7.5 centimeter. Could you do different sizes? Yes, you could. But it's kind of the size I like. And then you might need to flour and then just cut out. And just I'm going to put 12 on a baking sheet. 3 across, 4 down. Okay, I got 12 out of that. So you're going to gather up the scraps, re-roll, and then we have our other half of the pastry. You're going to do the same thing. For this amount of pastry total, you will get about 36 to 40 turnovers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap, put it back in the fridge just to let it to relax, firm up a little because we did work it. And then when we come back, we are going to fill our mushroom turnovers. So now we are ready to assemble our mushroom turnovers. Now, first, I forgot to do this. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of finely chopped parsley. Kind of adds nice color and flavor. You don't have to, but I like it. So, and then we need an egg wash. So you will need like 1 large egg, and just whisk that. Okay, that's that. So, what you're going to do, I mean, you could work with a whole bunch or just 1 at a time. Take your round, and it's just chilled a little, make it easier to work with. Take a pastry brush, dip it in your egg wash, and just put it around to the outside. It's going to act as a glue when we fold this over. And then you only want a little bit, just about a teaspoon of your mushroom filling. I know it doesn't seem like very much, but these are pretty small. And if you add, which we all have the tendency to put more in, the problem with that is, you know, the mushroom filling could leak out. So that's why you don't use about a teaspoon. Okay, so it's just like that. And then what you want to do is fold over and press down. Kind of press down so you get the air out and seal the edges like so. And that egg wash acts like a glue. And then when you have it like that, take a fork and then just press down to seal. That makes sure it doesn't, when you bake, it won't come apart. Plus, I think it adds a nice look to it. And then what we're going to do is you want to make a little slit to let the air out. And so you could use like a razor blade or just a knife, and then I just make 1 slit in the top. I mean, you could get fancy and make, if you want. And then what we're going to do is brush the top like so. Just a nice, that'll give a nice shine, helps with browning. And then to finish that off, I like to take some sesame seeds. I'm just using the white ones. You could use the black, like so. And that is our mushroom turnover. Whoops. So then put those back on the sheet. You're going to do all of them. And then I like to chill this while we preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 200 degrees Celsius. Now, if you don't want to bake them all off, you can freeze them. That's what I do. Freeze them unbaked. I put them all on the baking sheet in a single layer. Then just take your baking sheet, put it into the freezer until they're frozen solid. And then just pick them up, put them in like an airtight container, plastic bag, and you can store them for a month or 2 months, and then you can just bake them frozen. They just take like a minute or 2 than what we're going to do today. So that's the other thing if you don't want to bake them all off right away. So what I'm going to do, finish this and then chill them, preheat my oven, and then when we come back, we will bake them. So we're now ready to bake our mushroom turnovers. Like I said, you could bake the whole pan, you could just bake like half a dozen. So everyone's oven is a little different. I would say about 15 minutes. Could be a little more, could be a little less. If you're baking them frozen, of course, it probably would take a few minutes longer. What you're looking for is until they're golden brown. As you can see, these ones here, I've already baked. That's what you're looking for. So about 15 minutes. And rotate your baking sheet front to back about halfway through baking. Our mushroom turnovers are done. Put your pan on a wire rack. As you can see, beautiful golden brown around the edges. So, a little hot right now. I'm going to let them cool down, And then when we come back, we will try one. So let's try one. Let's cut it in half here. As you can see, nice pastry and then the filling. A cream cheese pastry is so good. It's got a little bit of tanginess, but the texture, it is very tender and yet flaky. It's a really easy, as you saw, it's an elastic dough, so it's quite easy to work with. And it's really good. And then of course the mushroom filling. Mushrooms, onions, a little thyme, little wine. Yeah, that rhymes. It's a really nice combination. Now typically these are used as an appetizer. They're very nice, warm, room temperature. Actually, I do eat them cold. But I often have them for like lunch or supper with a salad. It makes a nice meal. So you just don't have to have them like when you have company. So try these. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.